Hi everyone and welcome to my presentation 1.2 marks. So there's a mark in almost every SPL answer that you could be leaving behind without ever noticing that it's gone. And it doesn't feel like a slip, it feels like you finished the point, and that feeling, the quiet sense that the point is done, is the most expensive habit in the whole exam. Because it's costing you a mark on point after point, all the way down the script, by the end of this, you'll be able to take any point that potentially only scored 1 mark and carry it to 2. So it's one move on demand. It isn't more knowledge and it isn't more time. And there's a trap sitting inside that move, a version that looks exactly right and still scores you nothing extra, which I'll come back to before the end of the video. Of everything standing between you and a pass in the SPL exam, this is the cheapest thing to fix. You're not short on knowledge, you've got it. You're not necessarily running out of time, you're making genuinely good points and then stopping at one step too soon on nearly every one of them. So fix that single habit and you lift your score across the whole paper without learning one new model. So watch where your pen actually stops. You make your point. You reach into the case for the fact that backs it up, and the second that fact is on the page, the point might feel made. But it feels finished, so your eyes slide to the next requirement, and that instinct is right for the first 2 steps, and it's exactly wrong for the mark because only the fact is not the mark. The fact is only where the mark begins, and that fact does what it means for this particular organization. That's the part that scores, so develop is nothing more than the habit of not moving on until you have said it. And here's why this one is so hard to catch on your own, because it doesn't feel like a gap. So when you stop on the fact, you don't sense a sentence missing, you feel dumb. So nobody stops one move early on purpose, they stop because the point genuinely feels complete. And you can't fix a mistake you don't believe you're making, so the real skill here isn't learning a new step, it's learning to distrust that finished feeling, to treat the fact not as the end of the point, but as the halfway mark. Quick word on the company we'll use Holden Leisure Group again. I invented it, I built it to teach with. It isn't a real company and it isn't a past paper, so nothing here is a hint about anything, and I've handed it almost nothing on purpose, so a couple of figures and one fact about who its members are. You don't need a rich detailed case to see this move working, you just need 1 point and somewhere for that point to go. So here's our first point. Acquazon needs £12 million of upfront capital, but Halden holds only £4 million in cash. Now, is that a good point? It's a perfectly good point. There's a real problem in it, and it's tied straight to the numbers in the case. If you write that in the exam, and you'd feel you'd earned your marks, and you'd have earned exactly 1. Because you've told me there's a shortfall, but you haven't told me what the shortfall does to Halden. You've stopped on that fact. And here's why that single mark matters far more than it looks. It isn't 1 mark once. You'll make this same kind of point over and over across a whole paper. Every requirement, several points in each. So stop 1 move early on all of them. And you're not dropping a mark, you're dropping a mark on every few lines quietly from an answer that felt completely solid whilst you were writing it. That's how a script comes back short of where you were certain it would land, not from one big error you'd remember, but from the same small stop made again and again that never felt like a mistake at all. Now the same point, carried 1 move further, Acquazon needs £12 million of upfront capital, but Halden holds only £4 million in cash, which means Halden must raise £8 million externally, and carrying £8 million of outside funding into a venture this large raises its financial risk. Here what happened, which means I took the shortfall and I said what it forces Halden to actually do. Go and raise the money and carry the risk of raising it. That consequence is a second mark. Nothing new was learned, no extra fact went in, 1 sentence further, and the point is worth double. And that's what makes this the best value habit in the whole exam. You already did the hard part, the reading, the thinking, spotting the problem, finding the right fact, that's where the effort is. The second mark doesn't ask you to do any of it again, it just asks you not to waste it by stopping too soon. It's the rare place in the paper where you're paid more for work you've already done rather then for more work, and most people leave that mark on the table every single time. The second point is the same shape. Aquazon is aimed at families, but Haldon's members are mostly over 50s. A clear mismatch, the target on one side, the actual membership on the other. Both lifted straight from the case, and once again it stops at the observation. It spots the mismatch, it never says what the mismatch costs. Aquazon is aimed at families, but Haldon's members are mostly over 50s, which means Haldon cannot fill Aquazon from the members it already has, and must win a family audience it doesn't currently serve. A second call on cash for a group already 8 million short on the build, and notice what the consequence reached for this time. It wasn't anything new, it landed straight back on the money problem from the point before. That's what strong answers do. One issue feeds the next instead of each one sitting in its own little box. That habit, seeing the business as one connected thing rather than a list of separate observations, is commercial awareness on the page. It's where the commercial acumen marks will live. Now, here's a point I promised you at the start, the point that looks exactly right and still scores you nothing extra, so listen carefully. If Aquazon underperforms, it could damage Haldon's brand, which means this is an important issue that could be significant for the group. So did you catch it? It has the words, it even has which means. So why is it still only one mark? Because after which means it went nowhere. An important issue could be significant. Those aren't consequences. They're just louder ways of saying the point matters. And a point insisting that it matters is still a point that has stopped. This is a trap, and it's a nasty one because it feels like development. You reached for the development words, but the words were never the move. The specific thing that happens is the move. And I want you to see why this one catches good candidates in particular, because it isn't laziness. Somewhere along the way, you were told to develop your points, to show significance, to explain why things matter. So you do exactly that. You reach for the language of importance. You're following the instruction to the letter. But the problem is that the development was never about sounding significant. It was always about naming the specifics that happened next. Do the words instead of the thing, and you've written a sentence that performs development without ever doing it. So here's that same brand risk. Finished properly, if Aquazon underperforms, it could damage Haldon's brand, which means members, most of whom are over 50s, may see the group chasing a family member or a family market and question whether it still serves them. Putting the membership income the core business relies on at the risk, that's a consequence you can actually picture. You can see those members, you could argue about whether they really leave or they'd really leave. It's specific, it's about the company, and it's real, and that is the entire difference between the near miss you just heard and the second mark. So let me hand you the whole of this as one habit you can run under pressure. In about 2 seconds, a point every time you've written a point and pulled in a fact before you let yourself move on. Finish the thought and force it to name something that actually happens to this company that you could picture in your head. If the only thing you can put after which means is that it's a big deal or a serious concern, you're not quite there yet. Push once more until something concrete comes out. Do that on every point and you could stop leaving the second mark behind. And here's how to make it automatic, well, before the exam, because you don't want to be remembering a technique on the day. When you practice, not in the exam, but in practice, but an actual line under every point you write, and don't let yourself begin the next one until you've written, which means, and finished it with something specific about the company in front of you. It'll feel slow and clunky for about a week, then something changes, it stops being a step you remember, and becomes the only way you know how to write a point. That's a real target, not to recall the move in the exam, but to have lost the ability to write a point without it. If you keep one idea from all of this, keep the shape of it. A fact is where a point begins, not where it ends. The mark you keep missing is sitting one sentence further on that place you've been stopping. Everything I've just walked through, all 3 points, the weak version and the strong version side by side, is written up on a free page and the links below. There's a short so you can check whether you can actually spot the move yourself rather than just nodding along. There's nothing to hand over to get any of it. I'd honestly rather you used it than not. Two honest things before I point you anywhere. First, this is one move, not a whole technique. It sharpens the points you're already making. It can't write the points you never thought of, and it won't rescue an answer where you've misread what the requirement is actually asking. And second, the 1 mark, 2 mark way I've framed, this is how this course models the marking so that it can be taught. It's a dependable way to think about carrying a point further, not a formula. I'm claiming to read out any of the official scheme, and there's a whole other step, which is judgment, that I've deliberately kept out of this. It's a different move with its own traps, and it earned its own video rather than a rushed 30 seconds bolted on the end. So, where your answers get marked, that's the honest edge of a video like this. I can show you the move, but I can't mark your move. The thing that finally tells you whether it's landing is someone reading your own answer and pointing to the exact place you stop short. That's what the paid side is really for. The library carries its method through all 26 chapters. The cohort gets your own answers marked and sent back to you. Gap shown inside 48 hours. And if you're sitting, if you're looking for the pre-scene materials, the rehearsal runs 2 mark mocks. There's no promise about your result anywhere or your result anywhere in that. And there's no cap on places. So the links are below. I hope that helped, and see you on the next video.